Stop paying $200.
over. Hey guys, what's going on? Maple syrup supremacist, that's literally me. So, first thing I should say is, before the last stream, I actually got a dono from Voxlov, $20. It was very nice. There was nothing attached to it though, and it was not during the stream, but I figured I should mention it. Very nice of you, Voxlov. I appreciate it. How's the sound, by the way? I think it's looking okay. My cord for my old microphone went... I don't know exactly what happened to it. I think it was on the edge of blowing up, but I think it got wet, and that was it. So I'm using an older cord that is even dodgier than the last one, so we'll see how it goes. Anyways, I wanted to talk about this video here that got sent to me by somebody who I debate with regularly, a non-cell who disagrees with most of our worldview, and he sent me this as a over from Mike Cells. Can you not? Is my sound okay? Is my sound my sound okay? It's registering on my end, so I just want to make sure you guys can... Okay. That's good. All right. Anyways, this got sent to me, and it was as a response for critiquing Incels, and I thought it could be interesting. I didn't actually watch it, so I was going to do a live reaction to it and see what he has to say. I got sent a few clips from the video that made me seethe, so I know it's going to be good. So, yeah, we'll just go ahead and dive right into it.
This is Dr. Grande. Today I will analyze the case of Braden Peters. First I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the incident, then offer my analysis. Braden Eric Peters was born on December 17, 2005, and raised in Hoboken, New Jersey. Why am I not surprised? This case features a New Jersey origin story. Braden attended a Catholic all-boys high school in West Orange. While he was there, he developed an intense interest in a practice called Looksmaxxing. The idea here is that a person makes themselves as physically attractive as possible, sometimes employing extreme and nonsensical techniques. The term Looksmaxxing originated in the Incel subculture, which is made up almost exclusively of men. The term Incel stands for involuntary celibate.
The what subculture? The what subculture? That's so funny. It's like the best opener that has ever been come up with is the one that Rehab Room has.
Incels want to have sex, but are unable to locate a partner willing to engage in this activity with them. They attribute their lack of success to their physical appearance, therefore improving their appearance would solve their problem. After embracing Looksmaxxing, Braden injected himself with testosterone. This started at the age of 14. He claimed that he spent 14 hours a day reading about Looksmaxxing online and playing Grand Theft Auto 5. Despite this, he graduated from
Grand Theft Auto 5, GTA 5, and Looksmaxxing. Yo, that's just a recipe for disaster. I don't know. Look. My opinion on Clav is not that good. I'm not going to be defending him specifically in this. More so, I'm going to be pushing back on the broader conclusions he comes to about incels. Because that's what's more important, you know. Clav, I think, is kind of he's a sign of the times, but he's more of a clown than anything else, you know. I mean, he's not saying anything profound. Like, everything that he's spitting out on mainstream podcasts and whatever, this is stuff that Face and LMS was talking about 6 years ago on Looks Live and What Attracts Women, right? And of course, he got it also from the PSL stuff. Though actually, I'm not even sure. Like, I'm not sure if he was that active on PSL. I know he had an account on one of them, but I'm pretty sure he got led to this thing like most Zoomers through Face and LMS, right? Like most of these, because you have to remember, ER was he was not a Zoomer. He was actually before Zoomers. I'm pretty sure that Alta Vista shooting incident happened. I think it was even before Trump got elected. So I'm going to double check that. Let me see here. Alta Vista shooting. Elliot. Yeah, it was 2014. Dude, that is ancient if you think about it. Anyways, so, and that was when slut hate, PUA hate, lookism, Looksmaxx, that's when those forums were really active. That was before, it was just like that and also 4chan, right? After social media, like Discord style social media kicked off, it was a completely different way of getting this information. So I don't even think that Clav got started from finding the Looksmaxx stuff. I think he got started. Now, I can't prove this, but I think he got started from Face and LMS or something similar, and then going into it from there. That's what I suspect. Anyways, I'll stop filibustering here. We'll keep going with this.
high school in May 2024. Braden Peters attended a private Catholic university in August of that year, but was expelled the next month after the police allegedly found steroids in his dorm room. Now moving to the timeline of the incident. In late 2024, Braden Peters took a job in a restaurant and posted videos on social media, including a platform called TikTok. He uploaded content about Looksmaxxing, referring to himself as clavicular, because he focused so much attention on the clavicle. This bone, which is also referred to as the collarbone, connects the arm to the trunk of the body. Starting in October 2025, Braden gained a tremendous amount of popularity for his Looksmaxxing content. He was now a key figure in this movement and continued his effort to maximize his attractiveness. Braden used several controversial methods, including steroids for muscle growth and methamphetamine to suppress his appetite. He engaged in an activity called bone smashing, which involves hitting one's face with a hammer or a fist. He believed this would cause microfractures that would grow back stronger, which would somehow enhance his appearance.
So I'm of the position that I can't prove the meth or the bone smashing, but I have a suspicion that a lot of the stuff that he says that he's done is not legit. Like, I think he's deliberately saying the buzzwords for maximum impact on the public sphere, right? Like, he's obviously turned himself into a public figure and he's trying to get as much attention as possible. I have because bone smashing is one of those things that I'm pretty sure was proven to not really do anything. It's sort of like mewing. And now I'm going to turn this into like a big argument over over Looksmaxxing theory in the chat, but I'm pretty sure like mewing, bone smashing, these things are not really that useful. Like they don't really, for the amount that you put into it. Like I think mewing can cause issues with your palate, right? It can cause your palate to deform if you're not careful. And I never believed the stuff behind the shape of your jaw being caused by how you breathe, because like I knew guys who had horrible allergies growing up, and who like every summer they were mouth breathing because they were just, their allergies completely destroyed them, but they had perfectly fine jawlines. And what a shock, they had perfectly fine jawlines because their fathers had perfectly fine jawlines, right? And conversely, I knew kids growing up who had horrible subhuman jawline, but they didn't have any allergies. So then the question is, okay, well, I think it's the cart before the horse here. I think to some extent, this is one of those copes where people want to believe that they have more control over this than they actually have. And I think that's where the ideas behind mewing come from. But yeah, I'm skeptical. And look, I'm not an expert. I would defer to somebody who's done real hardcore research on this. I just am skeptical. I'll put it that way. Like, I don't want to make it into something I'm going to get into an argument over, because it's not really something I'm, like, as you guys know, my position is, like, I'm not saying looks are unimportant, but, like, the whole thing, and this is something that we're going to talk about as we get further into this video, because, like, the reason why Incelmatics took a different line from, like, Face and LMS and the other mainstream, the other bigger Inkie YouTubers, is because we accepted the look stuff as true, but we wanted to figure out what the other potential explanations were, right? So, like, we would accept that lookism is real, but, like, there's got to be other explanations, because we would see things that didn't make sense. Like, a good example of this would be if you look at how dating is rated by race in America, Hispanics are the most likely to say dating has gotten easier. Now, everybody in America says dating is more difficult than it was in, like, the past 10 years, but Hispanics are the least likely to say that, and they're the most likely to say, actually, here, I'll see if I can pull this up. I'll show you guys. Just 1 second. Because I have this saved somewhere here. So I need some of you guys to crowdfund me some Ritalin or something so I can be more focused. And no, I'm joking. No, we can't advocate any kind of trafficking of controlled substances. So that was entirely humorous and abstract. Here we are. So take a look at this. You notice that now, okay, first of all, there are some caveats to this, okay? It's not separating men and women when it's looking at race, right? So we know that the races have different experiences. Like, Asian men have it much harder than Asian women, like the relative difference. And black women, at least in theory, black women have it worse than black men because they're less desired, even though that's not to say black men have it super easy time, right? It's just like a relative thing. And it doesn't seem to matter anyways, because black women seem to prefer being single anyways over being with, like, a non-Tyrone black guy, which I talked about in one of my previous videos. I think the video that this slide is from, the Nats Woman and Friend Enemy Distinction video. Pause Draft. $25 tip for good work. Thank you very much, Pause Draft. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Well, I'm glad to hear that you think it's good work, because I also enjoy it too. Yeah, getting Chad to commit has become harder. Yes, it absolutely has. And Hispanics have machismo. Kind of, yeah. But I would say blacks and whites do as well. Like, I would say that blacks and whites are both probably the worst copers when it comes to this stuff. Asians are the least worst. And I would say Hispanics are not as bad as blacks and whites, but are coping a little more than Asians do. Like, if you talk to rice cells, you will find the occasional, like, extremely obsessed rice cell coper, but most of the time they are, like, they don't pretend that the situation's anything other than what it is, right? And, like, when they'll call it as they see it without coping about it, okay? But I think that has a relatively limited impact, because with Hispanics, Hispanic girls and Hispanic boys, or men and women, they don't have that big of a difference in terms of how they are in the dating market. Like there's not a huge disparity like there is with Asians or blacks, let's say. Like I think the difference for mixing out with Hispanics is less than 10%. So they're not, I wouldn't say they're equivalent. Hispanic guys have it worse than Hispanic women relative to, if we're using whites as the control here, if we're saying whites are about 50-50 just as a theory, relative to whites, Hispanic guys do a little less well than Hispanic girls. It's easier for the girls to mix out. But I still think that there's something to this, because it's 31% say it's easier today versus 16% of whites, 14% of blacks. That's very peculiar. And this is something we used to talk about back on Incel. We were like, there has to be an explanation for this that you can't boil down to looks, because we know from reporting. Actually, I can actually pull this up from another slide I did on this of whites, like how whites view other races in terms of attractiveness, and Hispanics are on here as well. Let's see. Here we are. Okay, so you can see, like, white men are actually pretty even across the board. Like, there isn't that big, even black women don't get that big of a penalty relative to white women. It's like a 10% penalty versus white women. Whereas for white women responding to non-white men, actually, it's not that small either. Odds ratio is actually what's important. Odds ratio is what's important. So for like, actually, yeah, odds ratio is more serious. Like, white women are pickier than white men. That is just a fact. But even then, we would have to assume then that it's either all the Hispanic women are saying dating is super duper easy, which I think is dubious, because Hispanic women are just on par with white women. But actually, it's interesting. In this particular study, Hispanic women actually do better than Asian women. But and they're only slightly better off than Asian men when it comes to white women responding. Okay, so there is a disparity, but if we look at the actual numbers, it's not that big. Like, it's like a 10% difference, right? So what we theorized was, well, Hispanics, first of all, like, my contribution to this was Hispanics are a young population demographically, okay? Like, the average age for Hispanic is, here, I'll pull this up. The average age for a Hispanic is really young. It's like 17 or something, okay? The average age for a white is like 52, right? So whites are heavily weighted in older generations. And because there's also, like, most of these Hispanics are first-generation immigrants, most of them speak poor English, okay? They're not, like, selected immigrants the way that, like, Asian immigrants are, let's say. Like the H-1B immigrants that are from high-income backgrounds, educated backgrounds. These are people that are not educated. They typically don't speak good English, and they're insular within their own communities. They've colonized entire sections of the United States and created these enclaves of Hispanics. Like, I remember that. I was IRL, or not IRL. I was like in a group call with some people, and this one guy told me he was in LA. He's from California in LA, and he went down into a heavily Mexican part of LA, and he went into a supermarket, and people were staring at him like he was a space alien. And this is just like a white guy with, and he's like brown hair, green eyes, white guy, right? So like not that common nowadays for younger people, but still, and they were looking at him like he was an alien, and that's sort of a sign that your country is not really composed of what it used to be, right? Anyways, the point is that this creates a captive audience when it comes to the women. And so Hispanics, there is admixture happening, but it's mostly in the second, third generation, right? It's not the first generation Hispanics. So the first generation Hispanics actually have an advantage here. And because they have their own sort of segregated dating market, they don't have to deal with the same looks expectations that we do, right? And this also gets into other things like, well, Hispanics, like whites, are often sending their kids to college. What ends up happening when you send your kids to college? You send them to like a state school or maybe out of state. And then if they get an education, they're going to have to go to wherever the jobs are for their education, their field. That could be halfway across the country, right? Like if you're from Idaho and you send your kid to a state school to be like a geologist or something, they might end up having to go to Colorado or whatever, right? They're not gonna stay in their community. That's the point, right? Whereas with Hispanics, they don't typically go for education the way that whites do, right? Lower IQ, not as high achievement rates. But the upside to that is that they stay in their own communities. Yeah, they're poorer. They don't make as much money. They're not as high status in terms of their careers. But they form these contiguous communities. And like when I've talked to Hispanics about this, like just normal Hispanics, they've told me that like the way that they get into relationships is like they'll have like a cousin, and their cousin will introduce them to their friend, and like that's how they form relationships, right? And the concept of that for whites is really staggering, because I don't think, like, my father's side is fairly large in terms of family. French Canadians up until the 60s had like huge families, like Hispanics did up until the 2000s. But even then, I couldn't imagine like having a female cousin introduce me to her friend as a dating option. You know, but that's very common with Hispanics, or it was. I don't know. Things may have changed since then. Won't they become westernized over time as the women become wealthier and the birth rate drops? In theory, yes. In theory, yes. It's hard to say, though, because it depends on whether the border stays open and you continue to have migration. Because there's all this talk about how, oh, look at the birth rates in Latin America. The birth rates in Latin America are dropping really fast. Look at Mexico's now below America. And yeah, that's true. But these things take like a 2-decade-long lag before you start seeing them impact the adult population, okay? Because like even if the birth rates collapse tomorrow, that it'll take 20 years before the children that were not born today are adults and are able to interact in the adult dating pool, okay? So there's going to be a 20-year lag on this, which, by the way, is why if you're looking at a country to geomax to, one of the most important things to see is when the birth rate dropped, okay? Because that'll tell you when things are going to get a lot worse in terms of the male-female relations and dating and everything like that. That's a big factor. And it's going to impact different countries differently, right? Like from what I've seen with Southeast Asia, it seems like there's a lot of transgenderism that's going on. Like we talked about it in the Cmaxxing live stream, which at some point I'm going to re-upload, where there's like a big percentage of Thais that are ladyboys, and there's like economic motivations and others, but probably a big factor is just the gender ratio, right? But it could be, though, that there could be incoming migration that continues until America is completely transformed demographically. Then the question, though, is, well, we're already seeing demographic transition in Mexico. We've already seen the birth rates collapse in Mexico. Why wouldn't it happen over in America, even if America gets taken over by Mexicans and becomes Mexico 2.0? Why wouldn't it just flip over? So it's true. Like, I don't think it's going to be a long-term thing. But it still has an effect. And I think this is what explains Mexicans, Hispanics generally, doing better and perceiving the dating market as being better compared to whites or blacks. And why did your mom pick an old cell? I don't know. Like, this is... I've had this conversation with her before. I think that she just had, like, daddy issues or something. Like, my grandfather wasn't the most responsible father, I suppose. Not in the sense that he was a deadbeat, but he was just, like, not a great guy. But I won't get into that because that's kind of a long story. You didn't catch the stream using mobile data to watch. Well, I'm glad to see you made it, Anton. And it's over for mom cells. Don't want to be that guy, but if this is a global problem, eventually reaches out. Yeah, you're 100% right. I am not real. 100% right. It is just a temporary solution, or it's not. It's a non-solution, and it's because this is the same as like mass immigration, right? Mass immigration is identically a temporary fix for a permanent problem, right? Because you're dealing with a declining population. And instead of dealing with the root causes and, for example, incentivizing fertility and then dealing with the other side effects of that, which could include increased cost of like raising children because you have to pay out people to raise children, or you have to like pay women to become mothers. Instead of doing that, you just import fully grown people, and it's way cheaper. It's a lot more cost effective. It's a lot more efficient, right? But it's all you're doing is just draining the rest of the world. And then what happens when they run out of people? Because they're all declining in fertility. Like, nobody wants to live as like a third world shithole population, right? Like, people don't want to live in mud huts and have like 10 kids and half of them are starving, right? Like, nobody wants to live that way. You're seeing birth rates crash everywhere, including Africa, because Africans don't want to live that way. Neither do Indians, right? Birth rate in India has just dropped below replacement. So there is no permanent solution that doesn't deal with this. And this is why I've speculated about like, how would you fix this in a realistic way? Like, I'm assuming that global Talibanism is not going to happen. I don't think that's realistic at all. So I'm trying to think, like, knowing the psychological situation that we're in, psychologically, politically, socially, like, what is the most realistic way to get out of this? And I've speculated, like, if I was in control of America, I would do a 1924 Immigration Act that like re-engineer it to maintain the proportions of the population as they are now. So like 60% white, 20% Hispanic, 13% black, 7% Asian, roughly that. And like, we'll use immigration policy to keep it at those proportions. And then I would like just pay women a full-time salary if they're married to have kids, because that gets them out of the workforce. And it would be expensive, but we're also seeing a massive amount of automation anyways. So like, you could pay that off through automation. Like, that's the only thing I could think of that would potentially, and I don't even know if it would work, but I think it's like a realistic possibility. Like, you could actually get a percentage of women on board with this, and you could also get most men on board with this, I think. But yeah, that's been my speculation. Well, the carrot doesn't work because it's not, you still have a situation where women have to choose between being economically independent or having children. And women will choose being economically independent 10 times out of 10. And now I know that economic independence here is like, well, is there really economic independence? Because they have all these make work jobs and like they get favoritism from the government for employment. And yeah, okay. But I'm still saying, like, they perceive it as economic independence, and they are going to choose that over being dependent on a man for survival, right? And as a result, the only way that you can get around that is just by saying, okay, we'll give you the equivalent of like a median salary to just have like 2 or 3 kids if you're married to the guy. And so you will be economically independent. Like, you'll control the money. And on top of that, this then opens up this gets a lot of women out of the job market, and then men can fill the roles that they're leaving behind. And given that automation is also increasing, this would be a potential way of offsetting that. But like, that's the only thing I could think of, you know. Yeah, they pay women to have kids, but they pay them like a bonus. They don't pay them, like, I'm talking like, the only way that you could get this working is by making childbirth equivalent to a job, like having and raising children equivalent to a paid income. That's the only way you could do it, unfortunately. Like, I don't see any other way, because, yeah, again, like, women don't want to surrender any kind of independence, which, you know, from their perspective, like, if I was a woman, I probably wouldn't want that either. So I could kind of understand, like, if you look at it from their perspective, Like, you want maximum independence and self-determination to do what you want. Makes sense why they would have that point of view, right? But I'm not even sure if it would work. It probably, like I'm saying, I think this is the most possible way of doing it, the most realistic way of doing it. It may not even be possible that way, though. It might not even work. Anyways, I got massively off topic here, but we'll go back to continuing this. We're only 2 minutes in. If finishing this video might take the whole stream, who knows? Second here.
There is no scientific evidence supporting the effectiveness of this home improvement-themed beauty technique. On December 24, 2025, a video of one of Braden's live streams attracted attention. It featured Braden appearing to hit a man with a Tesla Cybertruck in Miami-Dade County, Florida. The man had allegedly stalked Braden. This incident, which did not involve any criminal charges, led to Braden being banned from the platform Kick. Later, he was allowed back on the platform. Less than a year after he became famous, Braden was earning $100,000 a month for live streams performed on Kick. He also sold a course on Looksmaxxing and self-improvement for $50 a month. Braden referred to becoming more attractive and gaining sexual prospects as ascending one's visual presence. This is what his followers were looking for. They wanted to ascend, just like Braden. The success that Braden had in his social media venture was staggering. He has been called one of the most prominent influencers in the Looksmaxxing community. At some point, he moved into a 6,500 square foot mansion on Mola Avenue in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, which rents for $65,000 a month. The mansion is valued at over $9 million. 6,500 square feet might seem like overkill, but Braden has to fit his ego in that house. On February 7, 2026, Braden was arrested in Scottsdale, Arizona for possessing a forged instrument, using a fake ID, and suspicion of dangerous drug possession. The charges were dropped 4 days later. On March 26, 2026, Braden was arrested and charged with battery in connection to allegedly provoking a physical altercation between...
Just want to say, I like how they make him out to be the sinister character. Like, the only thing he's missing here is this sinister music that they do in, like, the, you know those things that women love to watch? Like the true crime documentaries, where they have, like, the sinister, spooky music in the background? That's the only thing they're missing here.
Between his girlfriend, named Violet, and an influencer named Jenny. Around the same time, he became the target of an investigation after allegedly shooting a dead alligator on a live stream. During an interview with 60 Minutes Australia, which aired on April 12, 2026, Braden was asked about the association between incels and Looksmaxxing. As I mentioned, the term Looksmaxxing originated in the Incel subculture. He responded, quote, "I'm not linked to that group in any way. Looksmaxxing is self-improvement, right? So it's about potentially ascending out of that category, and so that would be kind of one of the goals, is to disassociate from being an incel and overcome that," unquote. At another point, the interviewer said, "You
know, I will give Clav credit. I don't think I've seen anything about him directly shitting on incels. Like, whenever he's been directly confronted about incels, he's either dissimulated in that way that he just did now, or he's just straight up ended the interview. So at least there's that. We got to give him something, right?
You've obviously shared company with Andrew Tate and other, dare I say, rather controversial figures. Why do you spend time with people like that?" Braden said, "All right, have a nice day," and accused the interviewer of trying to make this political. He stood up and walked away, ending the interview. On April 14, 2026, while Braden was live streaming at a restaurant in Brickell, Florida, he started slurring his words and repeating phrases multiple times. He was taken to a hospital and treated for a suspected overdose. On the next day, he posted on social media saying, quote, "All of these substances are just a cope, trying to feel neurotypical while being in public, but obviously that isn't a real solution. The worst part of tonight was my face descending from the life support mask," unquote. At the time I am making this video, Braden Peters continues to enjoy phenomenal success as a controversial social media influencer. Now moving to my analysis. Braden's ideology aligns very well with the incel subculture, despite his denial that he has any association with that community. I imagine that many of his customers...
Oh no. He's been identified as a member of the what community? Oh no. It's over. Career ended. Oh, let me just catch up on the chats here. Imperialism. Wait, let me see here. You have to ask yourself, having kids are enough. You get married if it's, yeah. She cheating if you 100%. I am not real. That's not even something we consider because of like the situation that we're in, right? We're focused on just like the bare bones, right? For example, Japan is a little better than South Korea and China, and also better than a number of European countries in terms of their birth rate. But at the same time, they have a lot of other like structural problems with their culture. Like we have some Japanese cells on my server, for example. Which, by the way, you can join my server if you've ever sent a super chat in the past. I'll generate an invite to that now. Just a second here. There. So yeah, if anyone wants to join my Discord server, might as well shill it now that it's come to my mind. If you've ever sent a super chat in the past, just show receipt that you did, and you can be welcome aboard. So it's a lot of fun. But anyways, we have some Japanese guys in our server, and they'll talk about like the situation in Japan in some sense is not as bad, but in other ways, like Japanese women are notorious for being like really like dry and almost like soulless with how they deal with relationships and behavior. Like it's considered the norm as a Japanese woman. As soon as you have kids, you just stop sleeping with your husband completely. And like it's even seen as the norm for these guys to like go see escorts, and it's seen as acceptable by the woman. And you'd think, oh well, like there's some guys who would think, well, isn't that based? I would say no, it's not at all, because that just shows that she has like zero attachment to you whatsoever. Like it's just a monetary arrangement, right? So it's not great. Like they have a lot of their own problems, even though that on the surface they don't have a lot of the problems we have, but they're different problems, right? Anyways. Future belongs to China. I mean, China is going to be in a much better position than we are. I think that's more to do with them not effing things up as opposed to like them becoming super successful. It's pretty much like, what country has not fucked themselves over the most in the past century? Right? That's really what it comes down to. It's not even really a success thing anymore. It's like every military now sucks, right? Like the Russians suck, the Americans suck. We don't know about the Chinese because they haven't really fought anything recently, but I mean, they weren't that impressive in Vietnam. Like there's no good militaries anymore. Everybody sucks. That's a good example, actually. And then like the top military in the world is basically the military that sucks the least. That's the situation that we're in. Anyways, oh, hey, little broomstick. How you doing? Japan sells purple fruit Korean and Chinese women during World War II. Look, I remember talking about this in a video I did where the Empire of Japan, and obviously I'm not advocating, that kind of imperialism. It's not good for the people that were ruled as subjects, colonial subjects, right? But it's just a fact that if you compare Japanese women to Japanese men, like who benefited more from the Japanese Empire? It was obviously Japanese men. Right? Like they dramatically expanded access to all these women in these countries that they conquered. And it's not even like I'm not even like saying like the comfort women thing is some kind of model to follow. I'm even saying like, even if you set that aside, if you're the Empire of Japan, Japanese men are now the elite status group of men in that empire, right? So they could go to Taiwan, they could go to Korea, they could go to Manchuria, and they would have elevated status compared to the local men there because they were the ruling caste of men in that empire, right? Whereas Japanese women, they're going to be relegated to only Japanese men. So this expands the options for Japanese men, whereas Japanese women remain restricted, right? Whereas you invert that when the Japanese were conquered by the Americans, suddenly the borders were open. All of the barriers to women's choices were removed with the Americanization of their political system. Like women were emancipated. They had a liberal constitution that enshrined individual rights, and that obviously benefits women. You had this influx of Americans first, but then also Westerners in general into Japan. And, then they became an option, Not to say that there were no Japanese women that were patriotic or whatever and didn't want to see the empire fall, but it's just a fact that it's different incentives, Vietnam, good example. Vietnam, I love using Vietnam as an example because it really is poignant, right? When the Vietnamese communists won the Vietnamese Civil War, the first thing they did was kick out all the foreigners, and then the mixed race kids that were descendant of those foreigners became ostracized by the Vietnamese society, right? Because of course they would, because the Vietnamese communists, they weren't really ideologically, like they were communists, they were Marxist-Leninists, but primarily they were Vietnamese nationalists. Like it was seen as like the Vietnamese nation that they were fighting for, right? For all Japanese men were most powerful in all of Pacific civilization. That's true, little broomstick. Their star really rose, and like they got everyone's attention when they defeated the Russians in the Russo-Japanese War in 1905 it was either 1895 or 1905, and that was the first time a major European power was defeated. And I talked about that in my streams on Iran, how the Iran War is going to be like the American version of that. Like the Russo-Japanese War completely altered the perception of all of the European powers who just dominated the globe. It was white supremacy unironically. The Iran War is going to completely alter that. It's going to change the perception once again, the same way that white supremacy basically was ended by the Russo-Japanese War. Like white supremacy as a worldview, not as like an accusation. You're going to see the same thing with the Iran War, right? You're going to see this, because right now we have this perception that these countries are just sort of shitholes that can't do anything. Like they're always just going to be dominated by the rest of us. Like the only hope that these people have is that maybe the Chinese will get off their asses and do something to benefit them, because there's no way they could resist us on their own. Like that's the thinking, right? Like America dominates everything. There's no hope in resisting America from the outside. Well, this war could completely top end that. And suddenly America is not this unique hegemonic power. It's just like one power among many that is just as easily able to be defeated as Russia is, or as China, right? So it's going to be an interesting time. But so how they feel about Clav, imagine how they would feel about Rehab Room, Feltree. Well, the problem is Rehab Room is a genuine Inkie, right? Like, he's ethnic. I'm pretty sure he's, like, I don't think he's tall anyways. And he has, like, some other, like, he's talked about it, right? Like, he doesn't have the appearance. Like, this is something when Face and LMS was talking about clavicular in one of his, so we're trying to get him to go back on stream, but he does still do group calls. And we were talking about clavicular. And one of the things he brought up was, like, clavicular is saying all the things that I said, I being Face and LMS. And it's like, but the fact that he looks the way he does gives him all the credibility, and it completely, ironically, it's like a halo effect that alters the perception of all these things. Like all the BP facts are completely, are viewed in a completely different light because it's him saying it, not because he's actually innovated or added anything to it, which he is not. He's basically just picking. I've said before, it's like if you created an LLM using slut hate, PUA hate, and Looksmaxxing, and you just had it spitting out things. This is what Clavicular is. He's like an LLM spitting out the amalgamation of those posts on those websites, right? Yeah, look at the Spanish conquest. The conquistador killed off the excess male population and snuggled the native women. Yeah, and it wasn't just snuggling as well. It was also there were plenty of women that were happy to marry these incoming Spanish guys, because they were the new ruling class. They were the new dominant class, right? So that plays a huge role on women's perception of who's in charge and who should be considered the most attractive. You know, it's obviously looks matter too, obviously, but this is one of these other effects, right? This is the status element of LMS. Anyways, let's I'll stop bloviating about this. Again, it's gonna be like, by the time we get through this video, it's gonna be the end of the stream, just at the pace I'm going right now.
Identify as incels, or at least worry about their ability to attract a romantic partner. The underlying beliefs of incels are straightforward. They believe that women are biologically wired to seek the highest status men available in society, and this tendency has been amplified by feminism. There's something special about this time in history, making it more difficult than ever for men to obtain sex. The primary metric that women use to determine status is physical attractiveness, especially facial structure and height. Men who are ugly and short have only a small chance of romantic success. Many incels maintain that attractiveness is an immutable trait. That is, it cannot be changed. If a man is unattractive, he will remain that way for his entire life. An attractive man who is highly successful with women is referred to as a Chad. The female counterpart to a Chad is a Stacy. This is an attractive woman who pursues high-status men. She pursues Chads. Incels wish they could have sex with Stacy, and they are upset when that doesn't happen. In light of this belief system, it is easy to understand where Braden fits into the equation. Incels view him as a physically attractive, successful, and confident man.
There's something so funny about hearing this from the outside in this weird sort of clinical way that he's doing it. And obviously, there's some truth to it, but there's also some nonsense. And he contradicts himself, too. Because he says, he said there, oh, well, there's no way that you can improve your attractiveness. Well, wait a minute. What exactly is Looksmaxxing then? No, the answer to that is, and I don't know if he's deliberately being obtuse here, or if he's just not following his own logic. Because if it was impossible to change your attractiveness, there would be no Looksmaxxing, right? What the argument is that you cannot alter your attractiveness using non-looks based, non-physical elements. That's what the argument is. It has nothing to do with that you're deterministically going to be unattractive no matter how you change your appearance, right? What's the first thing that we say? And we've always said, fat cell is vol cell. First thing you got to do is stop being a fat ass, lose weight. Then see how this affects your face. Because your facial morphology can change with weight loss, right? So I don't know, again, if he's being deliberately dishonest there or what. And let me read what you just said here. Broomstick. I'm worried about with Clav is making the market more competitive, more men on Reddit and other peptides, more men considering lean maxing, aesthetic surgeries. 100%. Oh, hey, Tails. How you doing? It's nice to see you again. There's one guy in our circle, and he makes a decent case. I mean, I don't like thinking this way. Maybe this is my high trust psychology at play. But he was like, we need to gatekeep and obfuscate these Looksmaxxing elements. We have to avoid telling people to get hair transplants or any other like physical enhancements or whatever. We need to gatekeep this stuff as much as possible, because all you're doing by exposing this information is making the situation more competitive. And he's right. I mean, I have a hard time thinking that way, but it is a zero-sum game, right? So he has a good point. And Clav isn't that good looking. His girlfriend's a paid actress. He's not pregnant. Works for Kick production companies. She does OnlyFans. Pays the GF for Clav. Yeah, I could believe that. I mean, I'm not saying I do wonder how much of this is manufactured. But I would say that he's attractive enough that he could go to clubs and get some action from clubs. I think we can agree that that's definitely the case. So no jaw, losing face fat might be a bad thing. Super turret, that's actually a good point. I have actually seen cases where guys have gotten uglier. Actually, it's a funny example of this. Nico Cotto Avocado, whatever, the gay guy who's known for being obese and just eating food in a disgusting way. I remember he did this video once where he lost all the weight. And it was sort of this weird video. But he looked like a little goblin. Like, he actually looked better when he was fat than how he looked after he lost all the weight. Because he just looked like Gollum after he lost all the weight. Because he had, like, no jawline, no nothing. So it is kind of a balancing act. But for the most part, I would say, you get a bonus when you lose weight. Because even if you have like a normal average jaw and it's not particularly strong, it looks better when you don't have the extra fat underneath it, or don't have the fat under the chin. Yeah, the sooner things get out of hand, the better. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. There's something else that I want to do. Like, maybe I'll do this for the next stream, where it'll be like the real remigration theory. And because remigration, you're hearing a lot about it in Europe, and it's about kicking out all the problem groups in Europe. But I'm thinking of it as like, I want to remigrate myself. I want to remigrate myself somewhere really nice, and not even necessarily for like geomaxxing for a woman. As a matter of fact, like when we've talked about geomaxxing, sorry about the dog, by the way. This is what happens when you live in a shared accommodation. I remember when we talked about geomaxxing in my geomaxxing streams, one of the things that we brought up that was really important is that you do not want to move to a whole different country just for a woman, because you're going to fail if that's your goal. If your only goal is to go to a country to meet a woman, and you have no other reasons to move and change your location, the differences between that country and your country are going to become grating enough on you that you're just not going to be successful, or it's going to greatly reduce your chances of being successful. You really have to have the mindset that you want to change, and you want to change your entire lifestyle, right? And I've mentioned it, I think, in previous streams, but I've done more research on it. I'm going to probably, for my next stream, I'm going to present the research I've done on these Korean colonies in the Philippines and a few other examples of like expat colonies that formed into these almost like semi-autonomous communities that are like self-supporting. They're not just like a network of foreigners or whatever. They've put in the infrastructure. They have their own local schools. They have women. Like in the Philippines, it's not just a bunch of Korean men. There's women there as well. And there's entire families that are multi-generational there now, because it's just an easier way of living as opposed to South Korea, where it's just one of the most brutal countries on earth to live in, right? And it's paradoxically, if you're a Korean man, it's easier to find a Korean woman to date. Well, not find her, but like to date a Korean woman and start a family in the Philippines than it is in South Korea. Because the lifestyle is different. The perception of people is different. They don't have the same grind set in the Philippines and it really does have an impact psychologically on people. You know, it's kind of like how if you've ever known people who've gone on cruises, like I don't just mean the boomer cruises, I mean like just the whole family cruises. Like I had a friend who is from Texas, and he went on a cruise with a bunch of other people. Like it was one of those big cruises down to Honduras, or the coast of Honduras. He didn't actually land in Honduras, but it was off the coast of Honduras. And it was him and there was like thousands of people on this huge cruise ship, or I don't know exactly how many, but there was a lot. But there was like 30 people or 30 kids that were his age, because he was a teenager at the time. He was like 15. And there was like 30 other kids there around the same age. And because they were like a captive audience for each other, they were able to form these like really good friendships, even though they came from completely different backgrounds. They didn't have much like if they had met on the street, they wouldn't have had anything in common, right? But because they were in this sort of fixed location, they were each other's captive audience, and they had to deal with each other. This is something that we talked about, actually. This sort of threads back into one of the Incelmatic streams that we did. And first was the one who brought this up, is the concept of propinquity. Propinquity is this affinity or affection that you develop for other people. Now we were talking about it with regards to women and men, but it can just be people in general, where the more physical closeness that you have with somebody, like consistently living together in the same community, the more of an affinity you develop for them. And this includes women in particular. Like this is how women can grow. Like if you look at what women talk about when they get into relationships that are long lasting, like what they will say is like, I didn't like my boyfriend at first, but I eventually developed an attraction for him. And I know that a lot of us say that's a cope, and in some cases it is a cope. But and oftentimes this is a real phenomenon where it's not something like where they instantly are like they go from 1 to 10, right? That like they might be at like a 6 out of 10 for attractiveness for a guy, and then once they've spent a lot of time with him and like she has like a warm relationship with him, then the attraction goes up to like a 7 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10. You know what I mean? Like that is a real phenomenon. It's called propinquity is the term. And this also applies when you're in like a community where it's like a self-contained community of yourself, and then you have way more in common with these other people who, if you were in your own countries, you wouldn't have anything in common with. But because you're together in this foreign community or this foreign nation, and you have like this little community, you feel a much stronger sense of affinity, and it creates just a better culture. And ironically, like there's no studies on this, but I bet you that if you looked at the families in the Philippines, the Korean families in the Philippines versus the ones in Korea, I bet you the birth rate is probably higher in their Philippine colonies than in Korea itself, just because of that what I described, because they have a stronger affinity for each other as this as members of this sort of self-contained autonomous community, you know. The cost of living in Canada is so high that it's impossible to save enough to start a life in. Yeah, 100%, Mark. You're right. It's really rough, and it's not a coincidence that like everybody you see from Canada is some kind of crazy. Like I'm eccentric. Western Decline's eccentric. I'm trying to think what other Canadians they're just sort of weird. Collective Dismal is also unusual. I mean that in a nice way, but like our psychology in this country is abnormal. It's like it's a combination of the living conditions that we're forced into, and also there just seems to be something about, it's kind of like how the West Coast, like if you look at how many meth heads and whatever are in Vancouver, and then you go immediately south of the border into Oregon, or you go into Washington State, you see the exact same sort of phenomenon of like drug addicts everywhere and like crazy leftism. Like there's some sort of weird miasma that seems to cause everybody on the west coast of North America to go crazy. It's sort of similar for Canada in its entirety. Like there's just some weird like aura that this country has that just makes everybody miserable and just sort of sucks your soul out. I don't know how my family's survived here for over 300 years without just committing collective and heroing. So what's the scientific name of the phenomenon of parents effing over their offspring? Slangel put it, millions of years of evolution just so you can F your offspring over, LMAO. I think that's called pathological self-interest, like where you're focused on your own self-interest, even if it's destroying your evolutionary interests, right? What do we have here with broomstick? Clav is making lookism leave containment a problem for individual. Yep, you're right. Yep, you're right. I have to admit, I'm not somebody who likes being the zero-sum game, like we need to fuck over everyone but ourselves. But when it comes to this sort of thing, I mean, it is a complete zero-sum game, So now I don't really talk about the lookism stuff myself. Obviously, I'm almost more like sociological in my thinking. Whereas the lookism people, it's much more, I don't know if scientific's the right word, but it's much more measured. It's like much more exact stuff. And I will not criticize anyone for trying to keep that to themselves, for strategic reasons. Is Mediterranean oceanic climate easy for living? It is easier in the sense that you don't have to deal with a winter, right? But I don't think that's what is causing the lifestyle change. It's because, look, let's put it politely, Filipinos and these other, like Latin Americans, let's say, and again, it depends on the country, right? But generally speaking, they're not the sharpest tools in the shed. It's not difficult to outcompete them in terms of living. So if you're like a Korean, a 105 IQ Korean, you could probably find some niches that you can pretty easily dominate in the Philippines without that much effort. Whereas if you're in South Korea, you're competing with a bunch of other Koreans, right? Who are also very high IQ. And it's just total cutthroat, brutal competition. Whereas in the Philippines, it's not nearly as difficult, right? I think if I had to speculate, I would say that's probably what it is. And by the way, as a side note, this is also why if you're like a stem cell, like second gen or even like a first gen H1B or whatever in the US, your self-interest is not to bring in more highly skilled immigrants. Okay. Like I know that seems like it should be, but the reality is your goal should be to reduce competition as much as possible for yourself. Right. And like if you're like an Indian, H1B Indian who's like 130 IQ or whatever, you don't want more 130 IQ H1B Indians in here competing with you and the rest of the country, right? Your goal should be you want to close the door behind you and have as little competition for your niche as possible so that you can be as comfortable as possible. You do not want efficiency, right? Your interest is against efficiency, right? This applies for all of us, by the way, just as a side note. Like not just the most top tier people, but just in general. You don't want more economic competition. The only people that benefits are the financial stakeholders that are paying the employee's salary. You want the most bang for your buck if you're the employer. But if you're the employee, you don't want that. And it's the same that goes for these guys. They're like, okay, life is so miserable in South Korea. I'm going to self-deport myself to a much cheaper country with far less efficient workforce and less competition for like highly efficient niches. So I'm going to have an easier time competing in this country than I would be in South Korea, right? Like that's, I think, what the logic is. Hope Dismal's doing good in China. Yep, from what I understand, he's doing great. He can't access his YouTube right now because obviously China has like you can't connect to it in China. But apparently he's doing fine. So for the west coast of North America, I don't know about that. Because they're not easy living down there. They're just, well, actually, yeah, you're right. Like Vancouver, I'm pretty sure Vancouver has such a homeless problem because it's one of the few parts of Canada where it's not like it's snow free year round. so you can actually survive as a homeless person. Whereas in most of the country, you freeze to death. Do you believe in Mistau cope if the economy crash and can't provide for themselves? Are they going to look normie men as an option? I think that could happen, but if that does happen, that's not going to mean that the relationships are going to be good, because it's going to be this transactional thing, right? Like that's how a lot of Asian countries work. And if you look at how their communities are, they're not happy, right? They don't have like happy marriages or whatever. I guess you could say the fact that they are able to get married in and of itself is something, but I wouldn't say it's positive. Like you don't want a situation where women are miserable as well, because then they'll make everyone else miserable, right? They'll make men miserable, right? Now maybe it's impossible to please them. That's a different conversation, but I don't think that like money maxing. There's this weird thing with MSTAs where they think that having money is in and of itself attractive. It's not. Like a woman might see that as appealing as a means to achieve her own life goals, but she's not going to find you desirable on that basis. And this is one thing I got to give white women a point here, because white women are the least likely, in my experience, in my observations, to prioritize income. Like they'll prioritize status, but like a white woman's going to be a lot more willing to be the breadwinner than like an Asian woman or a woman from some other country. And okay, that doesn't mean that that means you can't beta bucks. And I know this is something that I'll get some disagreement on, but I think beta bucksing is actually even worse than just their more typical like looks or status-based arrangements. Because beta bucksing, there's just something innately emasculating about it, and there's something about, it's like a form of prostitution. Like I think it would be better just to cut the middleman out, just have like normalized, like if you're gonna end up with a situation where it's just transactional, like I'm going to have snuggles with you X amount of times per month, and you're going to finance my lifestyle. Like, how is that any different from like a sugar baby relationship? That's just my perspective. Yeah, I want whatever reality makes men not miserable. I don't care how we get there. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I consider myself pretty benevolent. Like, if we can figure out something where everybody's happy, that would be my preferred outcome. I don't know if that's going to be possible. I do think, and I've tried to explain this to women when I've had arguments with them about this, like you have to prioritize whatever men are, like young fighting age men, you have to prioritize their interests. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to pretend that women, or like say women have no interests and you have to just make them miserable. But you cannot allow fighting age men to be undermined and like feel like there's no investment, right? Because these are the people that defend your borders, okay, from other men. Okay, these are the ones that you rely on to protect you. Okay, you need to make sure that they're doing okay. And I don't think it's necessarily a zero-sum game between men and women where, if we allow men to achieve their life goals, women have to be made miserable. I don't think necessarily that's true. I think there are ways that you could come up with compromises that would allow both sides to be satisfied with the arrangement. I think that's possible. I don't know if it's going to be achievable, because then you have to convince feminists to not just simply always side with whatever women want as the default without considering what men want. Like you have to be able to bring them to the negotiating table. And if you guys remember my video on China, the technogametic state video that I made on China, my speculation was that if China goes through what I think that they're going to go through, I mean, it's kind of it's very speculative, but if China does end up like centralizing its reproduction, this could put enough pressure on our societies, because this would be like the equivalent of the nuclear weapon being invented, right? Because China would then be able to engineer its own population. It would not have a demographic crisis, whereas we would still have a demographic crisis. Like it would completely transform the game. This would really light a fire under the asses of people to come up with a way of dealing with this that is realistic and it isn't just playing around, right? I actually do care which path men can take not to be miserable, since even if excess men can get laid, what if that rug will be pulled a year or two after the fact, and if that path is demeaning? Yeah, I mean, I think pride and dignity for men is more important actually than just consistent snuggle access, to be honest with you. I think being able to respect yourself is like an essential human need, but especially for men, it's a really critical need for your identity, right? Like you need men to feel like they're in a dignified position, or that they're not emasculated, right? Yeah, I care more about male happiness because women are always decently happy and taken care of due to their innate value. Yeah, so this is the thing. If something that needs to be pointed out, and I have pointed this out, is that when you equalize men and women, because of how much more desirable women are to men, and also just the innate bias that people have towards women, like people want women around. They don't really want men around, like single men. Single women, there's zero threat risk from a single woman, right? And if she's young and attractive, I mean, she adds to the appeal of any place that she exists in, right? So there's always this desire to interact with women, to be around women, to have women in your community. There isn't the same for men. Really, and this is something, again, First would talk about a lot, it was really kind of upsetting for, if you're a guy, is like you will not be tolerated in public spheres, public spaces as a single man. Like, in order to be treated well as a man, you need to be with a woman, right? Because if you're not seen as being with a woman, you're just seen as being trouble, primarily, right? So, like, the things that we see as male privileges, in many cases, they're more akin to, like, equalization of an innately unequal circumstance. That just due to the nature of how the sexes are treated, Do you think we're that close to getting artificial wombs? I think the tech is far off. You'd be surprised. Like, yeah, okay, we're not there yet. But within 20 years, I think so, yeah. I could see it 100%. Within 20 years, definitely. Like, look at some of the... let me see if I can pull this up. Because I'll see if I can find some of my technogametic state. Let me see here. Is it here? Researchers create artificial womb.
I'm Lauren Neergaard, AP medical writer. Researchers at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia have created an artificial womb. The hope is that they can use this device to help the very earliest preemies, premature infants who are so small that today's hospital technology really is not very helpful for them. They have to be put on ventilators, in incubators, at a time when their lungs really are not ready to breathe air yet. So these researchers decided to kind of go back to Mother Nature and mimic mom's uterus with a fluid-filled container that preemies could be put into and take in amniotic fluid, a substitute for amniotic fluid. For this experiment, they delivered some lambs by cesarean section at a time when their organs were biologically equivalent to the organs of very premature human infants. And they directly put them inside this fluid-filled container that they're calling the biobag. Inside the biobag, the animals were able to take in the substitute amniotic fluid. It would coat their lungs, just like if they were still in mom. And the mechanical placenta was attached to the umbilical cord. Now, there are no long-term data on these animals, but what they did find was that they appeared to grow normally. They were able to watch them over this period grow wool, even. And when they examined their organs later, they did appear to be comparable to lambs of that older gestational age of the time when they would have come out of that container. In the United States,
Yeah. So look, they haven't gotten to the point where they can do it from scratch, but you have to realize, like, China in particular is in a position, they're not thinking of it like we're going to replace women with artificial wombs or whatever. Like the Chinese, the way that they think is actually very traditionalistic in a lot of ways. Like what they're thinking of is we need to, like the average woman is aging, we need to extend her fertility window. So this could be used as an option to extend the fertility window. That's how they're going to think about it. But I think just through drift, through like the path of least resistance, I think they'll eventually arrive at like centrally planning the population using these artificial wombs as a replacement for human families in general. Like, it's going to be really kind of nightmarish, but I don't really see an alternative. And if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be them. What about cloning? Cloning apparently has issues where there's like pretty severe diminishing returns from cloning. You could only do it a certain amount of times. There was a video I planned on watching about it. I never got around to it. But it's not, and also you have to consider the resource investment for that. Whereas it's easier just to, like, let's say, for example, you have a biobank full of eggs from different women, and you have their vital statistics, you have their psychometric statistics. You can figure out, like, you can eugenically plan the population using this collection of eggs, and also like whatever sperm you can find from Chinese men, right? So they have some pretty scary options, is my point. Because I would say the way that it's going to be set up, it's going to be something like what you see in the old animes like Chobits or whatever, where you have like these idealized waifu anime, like not actual anime, but you know what I mean, like these lifelike, human-like cybernetic replacements, but they're going to be wired to a singular network that's going to be centrally controlled by the CCP. And that's where their AI personalities are going to come from, and it's going to impose certain restrictions on them. It's going to optimize the male population. Like, that's what I think is going to be coming down the line. It's going to be pretty scary. Like, it's going to be dystopian from the Western perspective. I want my own copy of Sydney Sweeney. Interesting taste you have there. It's possible that future generations will be too low IQ to carry out this technology. That's possible. It's possible, I think, for us, but for the Chinese, I don't think they have the same dysgenic fertility issue, because right now all the pressure is on men. Like there's very heavy selective pressure against men in China because of the excess male problem that they have. So I think that they'll be okay. And Chinese women are kind of ruthless when it comes to hypergamy. And they don't just do hypergamy as in like physical attractiveness. They're ruthless in terms of material wealth as well. Like the Chinese are notorious for that. Asian women in general, I should say. Growing a baby from an embryo will be much more difficult. Yeah, Mark, I would say that it's still at least 20 years out. At least 20 years out. But it's not impossible. It's going to be there. Once it arrives, as I said, like, I think that it's just inevitable that an authoritarian state like China is going to conclude that this is the way out of the population crisis. You can't socially engineer the population to behave in the way you want. So, like, you can't socially engineer men and women together. So the way to do that is just to work around it, right? By replacing, not necessarily replacing all women, but they'll just replace a certain percentage of them, and it'll just be a continual supplementation of these artificial wombs and like these AI GFs, basically, or AI wives, until there's substantial displacement, or at least all the men are covered. I think that's what they're going to do. Have you heard about revenge against society attacks in China? Oh, yeah. I mean, the Chinese are not as criminally oriented as other races. But, you know, if your only option is basically just to do a wagee and then die alone, at a minimum, you're not going to have any kind of inspiration to support or defend the country. Like, you're a potential subversion risk, right? Because, like, if you have a huge population of unhappy men who feel like they can't fulfill any of their goals, and by the way, this is directly due to the policy of the Chinese Party, Communist Party, with their one-child policy. You know, now we also know that there's demographic, like, related issues that are not to do with the one-child policy, like the average age of the population pyramid shape. We know that that's also a factor, but everybody knows publicly that there was a mass sex-selective abortion on girls, right, in China. And so the CCP will be blamed for this shortage of women. And that means that you have this fifth column in your country that can be influenced by enemy powers, like the United States. And you can be undermined from within, right? Like, that's how they're going to be thinking about it. Imagine a one-child policy protected China against low IQ fertility differentials. Possibly. I've also seen that there's dysgenic fertility in China in general, because there is pretty much everywhere, right? But it's not as, like, I think it's going to be tolerable for them, because they also have a huge population too, right? Women become obsolete, will they go for robot companions too? I think so, but you also have to remember, like, what women want from men is different from what men want from women. Like, men are pretty content with a pliable, agreeable, feminine personality, right? Whereas for women, like, they want, typically, you know, this will sound a little bit red pilly, but I think it's just a fact, is that women generally want a man who is able to be assertive and have, like, status in his society, and is influential, and is able to, like, be the man. Like, I do think there is an element of that. I know that it gets over exaggerated by red pillars, but I do think that's a key component of attractiveness. You can't just be a pushover bitch, right? Whereas if you're dealing with an AI machine, it's designed to be pliable. It's designed to be agreeable and submissive to humans, right? Like, it's just going to be structurally, like, it's going to be incompatible with what women want. Whereas for men, I mean, men, you know, it's be a lot of guys that would be perfectly happy with just basically like a robot that agrees with them, cooks for them, and gives them snuggles on command, right? Like, it's, you know, we could say we wish that men were a little better than that, I guess, right? Or like a little more complex, but for a lot of guys, that would be acceptable, right? And even then, like, especially for cultures like in Asia, where if you look at traditional Chinese culture, this was something I was going to add in my video or elaborate on further, but I didn't really get into. But in China, women weren't even really acknowledged as individuals, like and also Korea, like you would refer to a woman by her husband, like you would say that she's, like you would refer to her by name as her husband, basically, like wife of this man. Like, you wouldn't even refer to her as her own person, you know? And it's not me soying out about them, right? Like, obviously I'm not, you know, I'm not saying, oh, this is horrifying. I'm just pointing out, like, this is how, like, male-centric ancient Confucian culture was. Like, women were almost not really, like, women were like an afterthought, right? And there's no reason why they couldn't, using these machines, go back to that, right? Because if you use these, like, AI robots, whatever, effectively you could recreate that system just without actually having women protesting about it. I do not think it's going to happen in Europe ever, or in Western countries. I think that we're structurally the exact opposite of that. I don't even think most men would want that. So we're going to have to either figure out something else, or we're just going to go extinct. Like, that's, you know, we have to figure out some kind of way of, like, I'm very realistic when it comes to the situation between men and women in Western countries. Like, you could not take away women's right to vote, because most men would oppose taking away women's right to vote, right? So, whereas in, like, these Middle Eastern countries, let's say, it's like they view women having these kind of rights as like a foreign Western imposition, right? Whereas for us, it's inherent in our civilization. Like women having equal rights to men was built into. It's kind of like how, if you look at like how mammals evolved into what mammals became, it's like you could see how the ancient mammalia forms from like 200 million years ago eventually evolved into what mammals became. You could see why they were going in that direction. It's the same for Europeans. Like you could see in the seeds of like the Indo-Europeans and European civilization from the beginning, you could see how it would eventually result in where we are now. Like it's just built into us in a way that does not exist in Asia or the Middle East or Africa. Yeah, Iran is pretty feminist, but like, what is the Iranian language? What's its origin? Right? Like, what does Iran stand for? Aryana. It's the Iranian language came from Central Asians, right? So, and the Central Asians came from the corded ware culture in Europe. They were the Sintashta and Drenovo people. So I think that that's probably why they're different from Semites, right? Well, the Iranians, like Iranian language comes from the Indo-Iranian branch of the Indo-European language, and that came from the corded ware culture, right? The corded ware culture originated in Europe, and they expanded out from Europe into Central Asia. Like they were Europeans, basically. Like they weren't exactly Europeans, but they were similar genetically to Europeans, very close to Scandinavians, the original Proto-Indo-Iranians. So I don't think it's surprising that Iranians are very different culturally from Semitic peoples, like Arabs. Actually, this reminds me of Ibn, like if you ever read the travels of Ibn Khaldun, who is this Moroccan Muslim who traveled throughout the Muslim lands in the, I think it was like the 1400s or something. He would describe how the Turks and the Iranians were like, he thought that the women were, owned the men as slaves. Like that's the actual terminology he used, because he was baffled at how much power and influence the women had over the men. And I think that's the legacy of the European influence, or like the Indo-European influence. Trying to invent this text, should they poach high IQ Western Inkies by offering them robot waifus? I could see that. I could see it. I don't know if they would need it. I do wonder. I have a suspicion that if the Chinese had the impression that Europeans as a whole were going to go completely extinct, they would probably intervene and like try and create a preservation, not because they're like Europhiles per se, but like it would be kind of like us trying to preserve the ancient Greeks, let's say, where it's like you know that these people have done some pretty crazy things, like they've had some really impressive inventions. Like you don't want them to go extinct, but I think they would create like a preservation somewhere, but they would make sure that we could pose no threat to them. I think as long as we pose no threat to them, they would prefer us to not go extinct. Do you think the West will be outcompeted because we're more gynocentric? There are a few ways that could go, because it's very speculative, right? I could see, because I talked about how you could see like the white nationalists form an alliance of somewhat of convenience with women, like not just white women, but women in general, though it would be mostly white. Probably it would be almost all white women. But it would be also just women that don't want to live under like non-European cultures. They would also be part of that, right? Like that would be part of the appeal. It would be like they could present themselves as like, we are the inventors of feminism and women's rights, and support our nationalism, and we will provide you with like we will grant you all the freedoms that you want and that you still have now, but we just want to keep control of our country and kick out all of these men from these other backgrounds. Like, I could see them trying to do that, and that could be a way that they outmaneuver a lot of immigrant groups. Maybe in Europe. I don't know if it would work. I could see it, though. I could see it. Europeans are not genetically women respecters more than... I don't know if I would say it's genetic. But I don't think it needs to be genetic. I think that there's, like, for example, a good example of this would be Jews, right? I don't think Jews are genetically the way they are, like, just because of their DNA. Like, I don't think if you took a baby that was born from a Jewish family and you raised the kid in a completely different family and they have no idea that they're Jewish, they're not going to suddenly they're not going to suddenly become a CEO of a bank and then start financing subversive organizations to mass immigrate millions of people into their country, right? Like, I don't think that would happen. As a matter of fact, I know that wouldn't happen because I've known cases of Jews that were adopted and raised by non-Jewish families that otherwise were just normal. But maybe what you would see is you would see them be more ethnocentric than the typical person of the host culture's background. A good example of this, there was this guy who was in a leadership role in this Hungarian political party called Jobbik. And Jobbik was very anti-Semitic. Like, they would constantly criticize Jews and they would go after Jews. And there was a big scandal that happened because, I think it's okay to say the J word now. I don't think that censorship is as bad as it used to be. Maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? We'll see. If the stream gets taken down, we know that I got dinged. Not even really saying anything bad about them. But anyways, this guy got exposed for actually being of that ethnicity. And he had like this crisis of identity, and then he converted to ultra-Orthodox Judaism after he found out his grandparents, I think his mother's side, is all Jewish. And but I don't think it's a coincidence that he got attracted to like highly ethnocentric Hungarian politics, because he saw himself as a Hungarian, but he had that innate ethnocentrism that you see from that background. I think this is also true for Europeans in some areas. Like, I think Europeans are generally have a weaker ethnic affiliation, are more likely to have like a tendency to impose ideas universally, or like to measure ideas based on their universal applicability, and that Europeans very much like when they can do that. And they also are very Europeans prioritize reputation to a high degree, where being seen as a good person for Europeans is like super important compared to other groups, where other groups, they don't really care, right? Like for example, our Semitic friends, maybe I should start using euphemism because I'm starting to speak less favorably about them. Our Semitic friends, they are concerned about how Europeans see them, but like if you look at how they act in Israel, they don't give a shit. Like they will terrorize everyone. They will. There are stories that come out of like them using canines to engage in surprise snuggle against Palestinian prisoners, and then or shoving broomsticks up their buttholes, and then you have the Israeli population coming out protesting in favor of them. They're supporting their right to shove broomsticks up prisoners' orifices, right? Like it's that kind of behavior is completely unimaginable for Europeans, right? And that's because they don't give a shit how people see them, you know. And another example of this would be Turks, for example. Like, do you hear Turks? Like, has there ever been a case of a Turk being successfully guilt tripped about their history, about like constantly invading Europe, and like raiding European countries, enslaving huge segments of the population, including sex slaves? Like, no, they don't care. You know, they don't give a shit. Like, do you think they care about the Armenians and what happened to them? They don't know. It's a non-issue for them. Like, it doesn't even enter their politics. It's the same as the Japanese with World War II. Like, the Japanese, they're constantly trying to defer from, like, whatever, you know. And look, I'm not going to get into, like, oh, did the Japanese do everything that the Allies say they did? Whatever. I'm not the point is they did do stuff, right? They did bad stuff. We know Unit 731 existed, and they did a lot of war crimes and whatever, but to this day, they refuse to, like, condemn their own people, right? Like, they cannot be guilt-tripped. That's the point, right? Whereas Europeans, you can easily guilt-trip Europeans, right? Like, it's hilarious when you see it on social media. Like, you'll see an Algerian and a Moroccan fighting over who genocided the other more. And then a Frenchman enters the chat, and then they start crying about how colonialism was evil and how they were oppressed by the French. It's like total hypocrisy because it's a tactic. They know it works. They know it works on Europeans. That's why they do it, right? But anyways, that's what I think. Like, I think there are certain innate tendencies, and then the culture amplifies those tendencies, right? That's what I'm trying to say. It's kind of like how East Asians in general are more introverted than Europeans. They're less socially extroverted. And in addition to that, East Asian cultures also highly value and reward, like, introverted behavior, or like they tend to look down on what we would see as extroversion. They see as like being overly confrontational or loud or whatever, right? And so the culture reinforces that natural tendency, right? So it's like a feedback loop. And then because the culture reinforces a certain tendency, that becomes more genetically selected for in the population. And then because it's a predisposition in the population, it gets favored as a cultural tendency. You see how this becomes a loop. It's the same with all these different, like, cultures feed off of genetics, feed off of culture. And you see it in pretty much every culture, right? As Europeans are the biggest losers of the 21st century. 100%. 100%. If you look at the world in the 19th century versus the world in the 20th, I think you meant the biggest losers of the 20th century. Because if you compare the 19th to the 20th century, it's a completely different world. Like, Europeans lost everything, you know? And, well, I mean, they largely did it to themselves. Well, look, we know, particularly when it comes to the English and Americans, we know who is pulling the strings there. But, like, World War I was pretty much a European. It was like, you ever seen those memes of, like, guys pointing loaded guns all to each other in a big circle, and then they all shoot each other in the head? Like, in a big circle. That's pretty much what happened in World War I. Anyways, I massively got off topic here. We should probably finish this video.
Is categorized as a Chad. The Chad figure is important to the Incel subculture. He is both revered and despised. Chad is getting what Incels desire, namely sex, but he also may contain wisdom that could help them achieve success. If a Chad is willing to give away the secrets to romantic success, to offer.
Oh, come on. Come on. Could we at least put some effort in here? What's this guy's name again? Todd Grande? Could we at least put some effort in? Nobody's asking Chad why Chad is successful. Like, we're because it's like rule number one is they say, like, go take a shower. Come on. Come on. Can we put a little bit of effort in? Like, never mind. Let's keep going with this.
Offer a look behind the curtain, his advice would be sought after. Braden went on social media with a message that incels could interpret as hopeful. Again, they view physical attractiveness as immutable, but Braden is telling them something different. He is offering a solution to a community who believed they were out of options. Braden promotes this idea that physical appearance can be changed. Not only is a modification possible, an extreme transformation is achievable. A man can go from unattractive to Chad. This would facilitate many opportunities for sex with Stacy. The message that Braden delivers is exactly what incels want to hear. They have reduced everything in life to attraction. All their hopes and dreams pivot on that one construct. They believe that without attractiveness, no man can achieve other goals, like wealth and fame. Attractiveness is sort of the gatekeeper to everything good. If they can just maximize this one variable, if they can just look good, all the other pieces will come together. Not only will they obtain sex, they will get rich, be offered a great job, and have optimal social experiences. To incels, Braden's story is the proof that their belief system is accurate. He has confirmed the nature and structure of the dating world and holds the key to enter that world. According to Braden, he started out as unattractive. He developed an interest in Looksmaxxing, and now he has women, fame, and fortune. One of the strangest...
So are we actually pretending that Clavicular invented Looksmaxxing? See, maybe I should have watched this beforehand because I thought it would be a little more sophisticated than this. Like, nobody knows. Does nobody know this shit? Like, nobody knew about Looksmaxxing before Clavicular showed up, apparently. Like, where did he learn it? Oh, I guess he invented it? And who's watching this guy? 126K views, and it's 9 days ago. 1.67 million subs. There's a lot of people watching. It was mostly women, actually. Like, women love this guy because he does a lot of, like, gossip stuff. He does, like, their version of, or, like, a variation of, the true crime stuff. Like, he'll do, like, some true crime story where some woman gets murdered by a guy. And women, for some reason, love this shit. They love hearing about stories of guys murdering women in some, like, love triangle, especially if they're possessed with some jealous rage. Like, I don't know why, but they love this shit. Anyways, like, it's pretty obvious he's out of his depth here. I don't even know what to say. Like, Stacy, dude, like, nobody talks about Stacy except as an example of what Chad typically goes for at the end of the day. Like, he doesn't, right? Like, the theory is, like, yeah, Chad gets Stacy, or maybe that's who he marries, right? But that's the theory is that he's able to have access to all these less attractive women and just use them, right? That's the theory. Right? I'm a little bit heretical. I have my own views that I've already discussed on this, right? This is what the whole thrust of Incelmatics was about, that there's alternative explanations other than just looks or just, like, hypergamy theory, that there's other things that need to be explored. But, like, he's so far behind. Like, this guy is, like, 14, 15 years behind, right? Anyways, let's keep going with this.
Just features of influencers like Braden is how they insult and criticize incels while simultaneously making money from them. The self-hatred component of the incel community makes this possible. Incels want to hear how bad they are. They are not looking for reassurance. They are looking for sex. Anyone who can teach them how to find sex is a hero. Another key component of Braden's message is that appearance is the easiest thing for a man to change.
Find sex. You know, that's like it's one of the biggest myths that we need to blow up, is that this is all the Inkies care about. Like, I can understand why that would be the impression, but fucking dog. Sorry about the dog. If that were true, you would sorry, I'm gonna have to go take care of the dog. I'm gonna play this in the background.
Even though incels place a lot of importance on attractiveness, they recognize that rich and famous people can obtain sex too. The problem is the high difficulty level associated with becoming rich and famous. Incels want sex, but they would prefer not to work hard to get it. Many people recognize how the incel ideology and...
Okay, sorry about that. I'm back. Anyways, like, this is something that we need to change, this perception, right? If it was that... Like, if it was only about sex, you would not see anyone complaining in countries where prostitution was legal, right? Obviously, that's not the case. Plenty of Europeans who live in... Fucking dog. Plenty of Europeans who live in countries where it's legal, they complain about this the same way that everyone else does, right? Same with Australia, right? We got some of the most famous Inkies are from Australia, right? It is a basic need. It is 100% a basic need. But the idea that this is the only thing that inspires us, right? Because, like, at that point then, there would be no, like, all that would need to be done is just acquiring sex. It's just an unfair characterization. You'll never get the public to admit Inkies care about more than just sex because they'd have to accept we're not a caricature. 100%. 100%. Fucking normies make this stuff sound like novel concepts because it came from a good-looking guy. 100% true. 100% true. You can't dehumanize someone like that. Yeah. Australia has a lot of famous wingnuts. So that's okay. This is completely unrelated to the stream, but Australian wignats are quite funny. This is something I was talking about earlier, and this is actually something I remember. Tails got a little bit ruffled about it in my last stream, where I was like, "Listen, nobody really liked the Nazis when they were in power. Okay, it's not like they weren't. It's not like all of Germany suddenly became like immersed in esoteric racial theories, right? And like Aryan racial supremacy. Okay, that didn't happen. Okay, what happened is that they strongly identified with AH as a leader, like because he was a World War I veteran, and he saw himself getting screwed over by the Treaty of Versailles, like all the other fighting age German men of that time, right? And that's why they identified so strongly with him and they united behind him as a leader. It had nothing to do with the actual racial ideology, right? But that's a different conversation, right? Like that's how political movements work. This is also why Nick Fuentes, for example, has a much bigger following than guys that have an objectively superior ideology, like in terms of their worldview, consistency, like intellectual depth, coherence. Like Nick Fuentes doesn't have a real worldview, okay? Like he's all over the place. He changes his opinion based on the way the wind's blowing, right? Whereas there's plenty of others, like for example, Mike Pinovich, who's way more consistent in his views and they make more sense, but he doesn't have the political energy because he doesn't have all these young Zoomer, bitchless men, no foids Zoomers that identify with him because he's like an old guy who's married and divorced, right? Nick Fuentes is a Zoomer who doesn't have any women around him, and the lack of women, like alienation from women, is really the most painful thing for the entire Zoomer generation, and so they identify with Nick because he doesn't have any women around him and he expresses hostility and disdain, contempt for women. That's really what it comes down to. That's where political energy comes from. You got to identify those sensitive points and build your community around appealing to those sensitive points. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think he's a fed plant. I think he was in the right place at the right time. He was the right age. He was the right demographic. He was the right ethnic composition. I think being a quarter Mexican helps a lot because there's a lot of mixed Zoomers who are like part Hispanic. So he appeals to them too. I think he was just really in the right place at the right time. But anyways, let's just keep going with this.
The similar belief system maintained by their heroes are ridiculous. They view people like Braden as problematic. He is misleading vulnerable young men and potentially causing a lot of damage. If influencers like this did not exist, the problem would go away. In my opinion, this isn't really the correct way to look at it. These influencers are a symptom rather than a cause of the problem. Incels have a lot of extreme and nonsensical beliefs, but they do have a point when it comes to the power of physical attractiveness. Studies show that attractiveness is the most important predictor of romantic success. It is more powerful than any other factor, including wealth or fame. It is difficult to overstate the positive impact of being attractive. It is a massive benefit. For the most part, people search for the most attractive partner they can find, given their level of attractiveness. What has changed over the last few years is the effectiveness of the searching method. Dating apps allow people to view thousands of potential partners and select only the most attractive. I think the fundamental...
Sorry, I got to go back on that a little bit. I missed that first that part about like you finished off on like how attractiveness matters. It's like, yeah, it does. Let me see here. I'm just going to replay that part.
Or fame. It is difficult to overstate the positive impact of being attractive. It is a massive benefit. For the most part, people search for the most attractive partner they can find, given their level of attractiveness. What has changed over the last few years is the effectiveness of the searching method. Dating apps allow people to view
Yeah, what he's talking about is how the market has become more efficient, right? Again, it's like the conversation that we had about how efficiency is actually not a good thing for efficiency is not actually a good thing for the employee because you actually benefit from more inefficiency because there are middleman positions between the producer and the consumer, right? Because the way that you increase efficiency is cutting out steps in between the producer and the consumer. And that's where our employment is in these middleman positions. So it's like the more efficient market where you're, instead of being constricted to your local city, let's say, the internet allows you to broadcast your job advertisement to the entire country. And then you can get people migrating in from anywhere in the country to take this job, instead of you just being restricted to your local area because of the technological constraints. Okay, that makes your search for an employee more efficient. And that means probably that you get a better employee because you can be more, you have a larger candidate pool to choose from, right? But from the employee's point of view, this makes things worse, right? We want greater inefficiency as the middleman, right? And it's the same with dating. These dating apps do the exact same thing. They make it, when you're not restricted to your local area, you suddenly have your options expanded to perhaps like 100-mile radius, or you could even expand it to the whole country, depending on what country you're in, right? Probably not the U.S., but like smaller countries, where there's a lot better transit options, right? Suddenly the pool of competition is dramatically expanded, right? So yeah, like this is probably what he's going on right now. But we'll see what he says. He's the only one speaking to us, first and foremost, in Inkie, so Fuentes. Yeah, this is why, like I've said before, and I'm working on a video that I'm going to put out about this, where, like, I think Nick would actually lose more clout. He would lose more support if he was caught with an actual woman than if he was caught with a tranny. Like, unironically, I think that would be the case. And that's because trannies are seen as less, they're not really seen as real women, like even by guys that pretend. Like, this is why I think that there's an increase in, like, fetishization of them, because they're seen as more relatable than women. Whereas, like, if you look at how Western countries work now for Zoomers, like, I'm in an older generation, so I remember the before days, but like I have a younger brother who's in his early 20s, and like Zoomers, you're so segregated sexually from like such a young age because of how everything is done with online gaming now. Like, there's no groups of kids that are walking around together just looking for things to do. Everything is online. Like, my younger brother would have friends at school, but he wouldn't like go out and hang out with them in a group somewhere and bike around or whatever. He would play Roblox, or he would play Rocket League, or what's that other game? Well, you know what I mean? Like, these kind of games. He would play those with his friends online. Like, they would all be at their own houses and they would play together online. Well, this will silo these interests into like very specifically male and very specifically female spheres, where there's a lot less intersection than in the past. And so you're getting to a point now where our countries, the segregation between men and women, or boys and girls, is almost as bad as like strict Muslim countries. Now, the causes are different, and it's actually self-segregation for the most part. But it's, in effect, it's the same thing. And this is how you get like guys that will actually see trannies as more relatable than women, because they're not, at least they were male at some point. Like, that's how the thinking is for these guys, right? So anyways, to bring it back, as a consequence, I think that they would have an easier time tolerating, like, it would still not be good, but it would still be easier for them to tolerate Nick getting involved with a tranny or getting caught with one than being with an actual woman, because it's not like his political energy comes from how closely he relates to his followers, right? Like another thing, I don't know if I've said it in previous streams, but like Tucker Carlson is a more, and this is debatable, I suppose, but I think that he's more charismatic and he's like more intellectually coherent, and he is more publicly respected as a public figure than Nick Fuentes is. Yet, I think that Nick Fuentes, if he had to have somebody take a bullet for him or shoot a bullet for him, he would have an entire army of groypers that he could call up to do that. Whereas Tucker, I don't think Tucker could find any one of his followers that would take a bullet for him, right? Like people respect him as like an influencer, I guess, but they don't identify with him, right? Like he tries to do this weird thing, like, oh, I'm like everyone else. I'm a rustic cottage guy who fishes and drives a pickup truck, and nobody actually believes it. Like he's WASP aristocracy, right? Nobody can really identify with that. Like we can respect him. We can respect that he's really well spoken. Like he's charismatic. He's enjoyable to listen to, just as the way that he talks, his cadence. But he's not relatable. He's not identifiable. You can't identify with him. Nick, you can identify with. Like I remember I have this clip, and I'm going to use it in the video I'm making, where Nick does that. You know that he did the monologue where he's the kid from Chicago? That was a kill shot. That was an incredible monologue, because that's exactly what I'm talking about. That he was able to identify clearly, these are my people. These are who I represent. This is who I am. And he specifically says, I am this. He doesn't just say like, these are my people, or like, these are the people that we need to defend for America. He doesn't like contextualize it in any way. He says, this is me, right? That's a really key element, right? That's what political energy comes from. It doesn't come from just having the best argument, right? Yes, exactly. It's like, well, fervor, it's not just fervor, it's identification. They see them, like they see Nick, in Nick, they project themselves into Nick. And they don't want to see Nick's ideology succeed somewhere, right? They don't want to see Nick implement America, or they don't want to see America first implemented. They want to see Nick become like the caudillo of America, and to personally do things to his enemies and succeed personally. Because like when they see Nick getting taken down by payment processors, getting grounded by flights, getting ostracized from the entire respectable conservative apparatus at 18 years old, they see themselves in his shoes. They identify their own personal lives with him. And this is where like genuine political energy comes from. That's what real political energy is. That's how you actually create a movement. You don't create a movement by having a good idea and having like a really coherent and strongly argued set of beliefs that you can prove to other people that they're the right beliefs, right? Like that's not real political energy. Like another way to think about it is I think of the other people other than Nick, like Eric Arwal, for example, the Arval, the guy who does the Return to the Land. Okay, you could easily see him disappear tomorrow and someone else take his place, and it wouldn't have any impact on Return to the Land. Okay, like he's an okay representative of them in terms of how he speaks or whatever. Like his past is very sketchy, very spotty, but in terms of like how he speaks and whatever, like he comes off as a good public speaker. But other than that, like he has no personal loyalties. Like you don't see hordes of people identifying with him saying, I feel like I am this guy. You don't see that at all, right? It's a completely different scenario. Like he's interchangeable with anyone else who could equally articulate his worldview. I think if Nick were to disappear, the Groypers would disappear with him because they are him as a personality. That's his identity. Anyways, it's another massive tangent, so let's keep going with this video. I'm sure that we'll get to the end of this video at some point. Maybe before the stream. Maybe before several hours. We'll see.
Thousands of potential partners and select only the most attractive. I think the fundamental problem for incels is how they view this dynamic as unfair, not recognizing how it is simply the nature of the romantic marketplace, subject to the law.
So this guy, he's actually doing a fucking avocado toast firm handshake. Kids these days, they complain too much. They just don't want to work. He's actually pulling this shit right now. I mean, it's understandable that he's doing this because most of his audience are women. And it's kind of like how boomers, they're all retired. They don't have to interact with the job market, right? So any, like the impact of mass immigration on the economy doesn't affect them. So they can like wax poetic about it. They don't really have to care. They can drop truisms about it. Oh, you're just not trying hard enough. Oh, these immigrants are just harder working than you. You got to learn from them. You got to pull your bootstraps up, like all that bullshit. Like he knows who his audience is, and he knows that that's going to be the perspective they're thinking. So this is why he's doing what he's doing now.
Laws of supply and demand. Another problem for incels is their desire to be with the most attractive women. They claim that they are...
Yeah, this is just bullshit. This is just bullshit. Now, I will say that it is a legitimate criticism that there are guys who will overestimate their own attractiveness. Like it's pretty common for guys to rate themselves as a 5, even if they're not. Like nobody wants to rate themselves as below a 5, and then they want a 5 out of 10 or whatever, even if they're a 4 out of 10 in reality, and they're just in denial about how unattractive they are. There are a number of those types that exist, but I think that's just a lack of self-awareness. I don't think that's an actual, like, I want the most attractive woman. I don't think that's what it is. I just think that they underestimate or they overestimate their own attractiveness. That is a problem, but that's not what he's talking about here. He's saying, oh, we only want Stacy, because obviously he doesn't know, right? Like this guy's barely skimmed the surface of our stuff, right?
looking for sex, and any woman would be acceptable, but this isn't true. They want to have sex with Stacy. The solution for incels is to face reality and focus on the variables.
Citation needed, by the way. Like, he doesn't actually cite anything, right? He just sort of says it, which I suppose we should expect that, right? Like, these people, they don't have to justify anything they say. They can just say whatever they want. There's nothing we can really do about it. I mean, I'm going to critique it. That's what I'm doing now. But, you know, I get a couple thousand views at most. This guy gets 126,000 views in 9 days. So he can just trumpet things. And actually, I'm going to be really curious to see what the comments are going to be like. I'm going to look at the comments after the video's done. Anyways, let's keep going with this.
That they can change. In all likelihood, they will not be able to alter their appearance in a meaningful way. Maybe a little bit, but not enough to make a large difference. They can, however, invest in career objectives and social skills. Dating apps are...
You know, this is something Clavicular pointed out in his Michael Knowles interview. Gotta give him credit where it's due. Because Michael Knowles was like, oh, you're doing all this Looksmaxxing, and then there's like leg lengthening, all this like high intensity stuff. Why not just do what I'm doing and status max, basically? And then Clav just simply said, like, look, for the average 99% of guys who are not part of like American aristocracy that can't go to Yale, right? Looksmaxxing is a much better return on investment than like attempting to get into an Ivy League and becoming like an Ivy League elite, right? Like, that vast majority of us by design are not elites, whereas you can fix your appearance. And even though it appears to be more effort, it's actually not nearly as much effort as a lifelong career maxing, like hardcore striverism is. Anyways, let's keep going.
Are not the only way to find romance. Many people find lovers through work, through hobbies, and by building a network of friends. Attractiveness is less important in relationships that develop over time, like knowing a woman as a friend first.
Just be friends maxing. No, but I mean, I already talked about this earlier on in my stream. This particular section was something that was sent to me by someone else. And I didn't watch the whole thing, but I watched this little segment, and this got me thinking about the stuff we used to talk about in Incel Medics, like propinquity, for example. that is a real factor, right? That is correct. But again, this is not something you can do individually. Like, he's offering these individual solutions to society-wide problems. Like, the reason why we don't have these communities, if we're talking about whites, is because the American population, if we're using American whites as an example, the American population is one of the most mobile populations in the world in terms of like migrating to different states, like inter-country or intra-country mobility, where they will move from state to state to state to state for different career opportunities, education, and as a result, they never actually properly settle down. You know, I've talked about my sisters before, my half-sister on my father's side, or half-sisters. They're all sort of like this, because it's not that different in Canada, or at least it wasn't until the last 10 years, where you would go to school and then you would find a job somewhere and you would just move. And like my sisters are all over. I have a few of them in one city, and then there's like one in a completely different city, one in a completely different province. And they all live in these suburbs where the only other adults that they know are like couples that have their own kids that are on the same hockey team as my niece and nephew are, their kids. That's the only thing they have in common. And like vague sort of like what they watched on TV, like that sort of shit. Or like the hockey game. That's the only thing they have in common. There's no real roots there. You know, they'll move from one house. Like, you have the concept of the starter home, where it's like you live somewhere for a period of time, then you move somewhere nicer. But then that creates this transient community, or like lack of community. You know, so these options that he's describing here, they exist for settled, fixed communities where people know each other for multiple generations. This isn't something you can just invent or create out of nowhere. But yeah, anyways, let's just keep going. We'll finish this.
It's also worth noting that despite the dominant role of attractiveness, the other variables should not be disregarded completely. They can still have a significant impact. For example, research shows that kindness and empathy strongly influence romantic partner selection. Staying isolated and only using a dating app while being unattractive is a recipe for failure, but incels are not willing or able to explore other routes. Again, this is why the easy way out, Looksmaxxing as promoted by Braden Peters, is tempting to many incels. It matches their desire to avoid work. The strategy is simple. Take any proposed solution and add the suffix maxing. Incels are not interested in a long, uncertain, and socially demanding process to find romance. Looksmaxxing offers the illusion of control in a system they believe is rigged, which makes it far more appealing than strategies that require time, effort, sensitivity, empathy, kindness, and thoughtfulness. Incels and their heroes may appear to be engaged in narcissism maxing, but the underlying pattern is more consistent with laziness maxing. To incels, Braden Peters functions just like a drug, a tempting shortcut that appears to solve their problem, but ultimately makes everything worse. Those are my thoughts on the case of Braden Peters. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Just a reminder, I have hundreds.
Sign in. All right, I'll dislike it afterwards. Yeah, no, Looksmaxxing is the easy thing to do, apparently. Apparently starving yourself and getting surgery. We got to find Pygmy. We got to find Pygmy and let him know that him breaking his legs to get to a height where he's not just viewed as subhuman by everybody, because he's 5'3", right? And he's increasing his height to, I think, 5'7" or so, 5'8". But he's going through excruciating pain right now, getting these surgeries done. We have to let him know he's doing the easy thing. And what he should be doing is joining a knitting club or joining a cooking club. That's what you got to do, right? That's how you win. But no, this guy's completely ridiculous. Oh, hello? Can you hear me? Is my sound not working? Yeah, surgery is a crap shot. Yeah, I'm not somebody who thinks you can really move mountains with surgery either. I have seen some good outcomes with surgery, but it has to be, from what I've seen, it has to be very subtle. Mike is cutting. Hello. Is it, yeah, I'm 5'7". Yeah, same here. Is the mic not working? Hello? Yeah, the dude is like 80 IQ. Sound is good. Okay. Yeah, no, it doesn't help, but you have to realize, okay, 5'7" is, yeah, I know, we're all manlets here, right? I'm 5'7.99999 repeating. No, I'm not. I'm between 5'7" and 5'8". I'm like 5'7.8" or something. It might just be that your internet connection is not working that well below. That's strange. Okay. Anyways. Oh, I lost my train of thought here. Oh yeah. So 5'7" is bad, right? Okay. That's going to impact your options for dating severely. Like, you're going to have a lot of women that will not be interested in you. However, 5'3" is a completely different situation. Okay. 5'3" is where you're not going to be taken seriously by anybody. Like, you won't be taken seriously in any job that you do. Like, you're going to be treated as a subject of ridicule by others and like a joke. Like, it's pretty awful. So like, Pygmy doing what he's doing is completely reasonable. And it's brutal. It's gruesome. And there were cases, like there was this one case of this Indian kid who died of like a blood clot or something. And he was one of the early adopters of this leg lengthening. And this kid was a real whiz kid too. He was like, he had his own company at like 28 or something. But yeah, he ended up dying from it. And then his sister wrote a book about it. Fucking sister wrote a book talking about how traumatized she was that he died, and it became like a bestseller. I don't know if that's like, do we call that Foidmaxxing or do we call it Currymaxxing? Because that's sort of like, it could be either or, right? Yeah, my dad is like 5'10". My grandpas are like 6'4", 6 and 6'2". Yeah, same with my dad. My dad was about 5'10". My mom was like 5'1". My dad had a thing for like midget women, it seems. Yeah, I look much tougher and energetic in spite of short king status. I mean, I kind of cope that way too. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying you're coping or you're lying or anything, but I kind of do that myself. I'm like, I'm Gimli maxed, because I'm not like a tiny, physically small manlet, but I am still a manlet. It's just a fact. You know, you can't really get away from it. Mercer, should Europeans geomax to China if they want a robot girlfriend 20 years from now? Hey, listen, the whole robot GF thing is highly speculative. I would not necessarily put money on it ending up that way, because there's so many other things that could happen. I'm saying if things continue the way that they're going and there's no major disruptions that happen, like, for example, there could be a catastrophic war that wipes out like half the Chinese male population, and they wouldn't have their excess male issue anymore. Assuming that doesn't happen and things just keep trending in the direction they're going, then yes, like in the long term, that will be the outcome. But yeah, it's hard to say. Your dad didn't have a thing for midget women, but midget hypergamous void at 5'1" was the only available option. Well, you got to remember, I was born in the 90s, right? And my dad was born in the 40s, and so like he grew up in the heyday, like that generation, the silent generation, had the absolute pick of the litter when it came to, because you have to remember what the demographics were like back then. Like in the 1970s, baby boomer women were just hitting their 20s, right? And they were a big bulge of the population. Suddenly you had a big bulge of these young women, and there weren't many men competing for them, right? Like there was even demographic studies that were done on this at the time. Let's see if I can find it, actually. because it's quite fascinating, actually. I think it's in this one here. Hang on. There was a study done in the 60s on women's marriage patterns due to the baby boom, and they were saying that women were actually at a major disadvantage in the 60s and 70s because there was a excess amount of women for the men that were available to marry them. There will always be excess men. Actually, believe it or not, there's not always excess men. That's actually because you have to remember, like, men and women aren't just going horizontally in terms of their mating patterns, right? Like, women are always going to trend older, or like they're like what women will consider their mating options are men their age or older than them, right? Whereas for men, it's more typically, and it's usually women that decide this, right? Like, it's men aren't exactly that prejudiced against older women. I would say more so women really do not like getting involved with men that are younger than them. That seems to be a really strong distaste that women have. And as a consequence, men's dating options are basically women their age or younger, and women's dating options are men their age or older. Now, the windows are not that big. It's like within 5 years or so is the average, right? But that's still enough that the shape of the population pyramid affects it. And when you have a big bulge of people that just hit their 20s, suddenly you have all these extra options of women opening up for men that are, say, in a much smaller generation that are maybe 25, let's say. Like a 25-year-old man, suddenly there's all these 20, 21-year-old baby boomer women. That's what my father went through. And as a result, like, he never gave me any advice about dating at all, ever. Because he never had to. Right? The idea was sort of like, women just sort of happened. Like, you just sort of stumbled into things. That's how he did it. He just sort of stumbled into getting married and having kids. And he just sort of assumed that the rest of us would experience that. Of course, we didn't, right? I can't seem to find what I was looking for here. Yeah, be a 5'10" guy and get a 5'1" woman. Yeah, more often than you think. Women dating men younger than them. Women will date men that are a little bit younger at times, but they won't go significantly younger. And it's much, much more common for them to date older than younger. And yeah, okay, yeah. Women will go for men that are younger if they're tall, good looking, sure. But there's only so many of those that are an option, right? But if we're talking about the general preference women have, they generally prefer men that are their age or older. Usually like within a few years. But like, if you look at what women prefer, if a woman is 20, she prefers a man that's sort of somewhere between 25 and 20. That's what you typically see. Well, Ali, you're Iraqi, aren't you? So I think you would have a completely different scenario than what we would have, right? Yeah, all the female teachers are bagging their male students. Well, okay, like we get these high-profile stories of this happening, but then the question is, okay, first of all, what's the real prevalence of that? Like, as opposed to just it being a sensational story. What's the real prevalence of it happening? That's the first thing. And the second thing is, is it that these men are young? Is that attractive in and of itself? Or is it because they are attractive and therefore they're willing to get with them regardless of if they're younger or not? Right? So the question would be like, what's the limiting factor here? Or like, what's the dependent factor here? Whereas for men, there's a lot of men, and look, I've seen it in our circles, right, where they will actively say like a woman being young at this age, like 20, 23, 25, whatever, that is actually attractive in and of itself, right? You don't usually hear that from women, right? And you have to remember, like, women, physical attractiveness is important, but for women, there are other elements as well. Like, there's a status element as well, right? Yeah, arranged marriages aren't the same as before. Yeah, look, all of these things that these countries that were formerly, like, that operated under these different circumstances, like Iraq is going to change a lot more rapidly than I think people realize, right? Iraq is like, because I remember there was a story coming out of like Iraq has lowered the age of consent for marriage to like 9 or something, and there was like a big hoopla about it. And I'm like, yeah, okay, like, okay, there'll be things like that that do happen, but I guarantee you, especially with Iranian influence, because Iran's influence is only going to grow in Iraq. You're going to see them become more and more liberal and more modernized, just due to, like, that's just the sort of tendency, right? And I think it's going to happen more rapidly in Muslim countries than it happened in Western countries, because it's like a catch-up effect. It's kind of like how it's much easier to catch up with your industrial processes if there's already that in place versus inventing it because it hasn't been invented before in the second case, right? Like when you're the country that's invented industrialism, you're breaking all of that ground to begin with, right? Whereas if you're just catching up, someone else has already done it. You just need to copy what they've done, right? It's the same with cultural change. So we're going to see that rapidly pick up compared to the past. I think that's what's going to happen. There was I remember this is a little bit outdated, but probably not by that much. Like I don't think it's changed for the better with regards to Muslims. But let me see here, right here. So this is a little bit out of date. But if anything, it's gotten worse since then. Right? Look how rapidly that's changed. Actually, what's craziest is like how it's changed in places like Libya. Like Libya is a total anarchy state, and even then, like how much of an impact have they had? Right? All women love men in their prime. Well, I think look, Elio or Elliot Varda, I think it's true that physically speaking, yes. Like just like women, like looking physically young is the ideal in terms of physical attractiveness. But it's not just about that. Like there's also, again, there's like the status thing. Like women, I think, like it's sort of like how women have, one of the issues that women have with guys that are like even really tall women, if really tall women will prefer a guy taller than them, even if they have a guy that's like shorter than them but is still tall compared to the average. Like if you have a woman who's 6'2", and there's a guy that she's dating who's 6'1", the very fact that she feels physically larger is like a negative for her, and they would prefer to feel physically smaller no matter what, right? And I think it's similar with age, where they don't like the idea of feeling older. Right? They don't want to feel old, right? Well, they feel old if they're comparing themselves to the guy that they're with. Now, maybe that's cope, but I'm just looking at what is actually happening, and I'm trying to explain it. And like we can still see statistically, like most women are dating now. It's not like they're dating men that are 10 years older than them or whatever, right? But they're dating men that are within a few years older than them. So like the range is around up to 5 years. So it's like 2.5 is the median or the mean. So it's between 0 and 5 years older than them, typically. Yeah. Even an Islamic theocracy couldn't stop void rights in Iran. Well, here's the crazy part, Mark, okay? They actually gave them the rights with the Islamic Revolution. Women were not in the universities in Iran when the Islamic Revolution happened. Women's entries into the universities en masse in Iran happened as a consequence of the Islamic Revolution. How's that? Ayatollah Khomeini, he wasn't like hiding in a cave somewhere in Afghanistan or whatever, okay? Like, he spent his exile in France, okay? And he was interacting with the French intellectual class, okay? Like, this wasn't like a third world's camel jockey tribe took over Iran and then ran it. Like, they were actually very modernist in the way that they were thinking. And as a consequence, like, Iran has gotten to the point now where it's almost like a joke. Like, they're not really religious at all. And as a matter of fact, I have a suspicion, this is getting a little bit into geopolitics, but I guess we're kind of on that now, right? Like, we're not really talking about, this idiot that I was watching. Honestly, I was expecting more content from this guy. I was expecting better arguments from him, but it's just like misrepresentations. Anyways, we'll talk a little bit about Iran. What you see with Iran is, hang on, shit, I lost my train of thought here. What you see with Iran, okay, yeah, now I remember. What you see with Iran, I have a suspicion that they actually did get the current Khomeini, the alleged Ayatollah that they have right now, Ayatollah Mojtaba Khomeini. I think that they actually clocked him as well. I don't know if they killed him or if he's just like a vegetable or something, but he's actually, I think, out of commission. And I think the IRGC is currently running the country as like a military junta, similar to how Pakistan runs Pakistan. Because the way Pakistan works is Pakistan is officially a republic, but it's the dog again. Pakistan is officially a republic, but hang on. Sorry about that. Anyways, Pakistan is officially a republic, right? But in practice, it's controlled by the military. No, I just spooked her. I just scared her out of the room. As a fact, it's a military dictatorship. The Pakistani military runs the country, and the government can't do anything to contradict it. I think Iran is in the same position now. Iran is now a military dictatorship. They are using the Ayatollah as like the civilian leadership got wiped out, and basically the IRGC is commanding the government on the ground, right? And they're using Mojtaba as a cover. Basically, they're using him like a skin suit. Ali, that's my my roommate's dog. She was just making some noise with a chew toy, so I had to scare her. Anyways, I think Mojtaba is actually either dead or he's incapacitated or something, and he's not running the country. The IRGC is running the country. This is actually a bad thing because civilian governments are shit. They suck. Like, you don't want a civilian government. You want a military dictatorship because the military dictatorship can run things a lot more effectively without interference from the civilians, right? Like, they can make strategic decisions. Like, this is what Pakistan has been doing. Pakistan has been very strategic in how they've dealt with this war, for example. Whereas India is just jerking itself off. They have there's no strategy whatsoever because all their government cares about is getting reelected, right? So I think the worst thing that the Americans could have done is blow up the civilian government, including the supreme leader, because now the IRGC is running things. They're going to be a lot more effective, I think. Anyways, let me see here. Other than that, I think we're gonna wind this down now, guys, because I don't really have much else to talk about on this. I probably should have watched this beforehand, because yeah, it's not nearly as good content wise. It's funny, but I'm thinking I'm gonna do a video on propinquity, because this is stuff that we talked about way back in the Incelmatics days. But the streams have largely been lost to obscurity, right? Because, YouTube went through that massive purge cycle. I think it was after COVID, like 2023. Like during the Biden years, they got really bad with censorship near the end of it. But yeah. No, they're still gonna probably win, I think, strategically. But no, if you're thinking Iranians or some kind of like based Manospherian government, there's hell no. Like Iranians, like you could even just see how their diaspora behaves, right? Like compare the Pakistani diaspora, compare how the Pakistanis behave in the UK to how Iranians behave in their diaspora. They're like night and day, right? Pakistanis will be like, they'll behave in this sort of horrifying, grotesque way towards the local population. And like, you could just see that they're totally like, they view like the way that women are viewed in their culture is completely, like the opposite of how we view them. Whereas Iranians, the Iranian diaspora is like, they almost get completely assimilated in a generation, you know? And I think that's a sign of how their cultures are. Like the Iranians, I think, are a lot more similar. I don't know if it's due to proximity genetically to Europeans. I don't think so. I think it's just that culturally they've never been nearly as like rural, I guess you could say, or as backwards. Like Persia's always been a major civilization. So you're never going to see like the Taliban style stuff out of Iran. It was inevitable that they would just end up becoming kind of like one of the most secular countries in the Middle East, alongside Turkey, of course. But yeah, they're not Pakistan, that's for sure. Actually, Pakistan isn't even Pakistan now that I think about it. Like if you look at the cities in Pakistan, they're a lot more, the urban Pakistanis are actually a lot more liberal than the immigrant communities in Europe, and particularly the UK. UK Pakis are kind of notorious for being really badly perceived in Pakistan itself, because Pakistanis themselves aren't even really that. They're not that extreme. You know, like they don't have grooming gangs within Pakistan. I'll put it that way. These guys like Dr. Grande have zero credibility. Nothing they practice is based on a solid scientific method. They're like court wizards of Zog. Well, you know what's funny about that? There was this one guy who was on X, and I would get into back and forth with him, and then he would just stop replying because he had a huge account, so he could do that without consequence. But he was called I think it was called Psychotruth or something like Truth Psych something. And he was like, he would do this like fake advice thing, but he was very hostile to incels, and he would constantly like attack or try and undermine incels. And women, of course, loved him, right? But he got caught like trying to steal some woman from her husband, and then he just locked his account, and there was nothing that we saw from him ever again after that point. It's like Psychotruth or Psych something. He was like a psychologist or something. And yeah, you basically got exposed as a piece of shit. It was pretty funny. No, he was on X. He was not on YouTube, but most of the Pakistanis in UK come from like one backward. Yeah, I think it's called Mirpur, something like that. And it's like a really rural part in the middle of nowhere in Kashmir, I believe. Yeah, it's pretty much like they're hillbillies by Pakistani standards. It's pretty funny. Well, it's not funny because, I mean, look at what they're doing to the UK, but it's just kind of, it's unfortunate. It'd be kind of like if like the worst elements of Appalachia got it mass imported into Japan, and that was how the Japanese perceived like white Anglos. Anyways, guys, I think I'm gonna wind down the stream now. Yeah, it was a pretty good stream, I think, and also the dog is acting up. Unfortunately, I have little control over that, but yeah, I'm going to be doing streams now Sunday, because then both Americans and Europeans can catch it. So we'll try and make it more consistent. So yeah, guys, I appreciate you coming along.